goodness, there was no waiting to get food. All right, so if you read the email, just to reiterate, we've no study next week. I'll be in Phoenix, and then the week after we'll only have the 2 more. So
Is this where you're going to visit your uncle?
yeah.
Okay, cool.
But I'm actually going to go see Rick and Monica Justice first.
Yeah, and Rick and Monica.
Yeah, swing by there,
great.
and then I'll head on down to Sun City, I think is what it's called. That's like 40 miles away. Is that Debbie? Nope. Unless you brought a man. Okay. Now, in the first study, I was going to define favor, but I decided to just set the context first and define it right off the bat in today's. And I want to do it from the original language, which, it's funny, the word is hen, but it's actually pronounced Cain in the Hebrew.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was like.
Okay.
I had no idea. And it is, quote, acts which display one's fondness or compassion for another, and then acts of kindness displaying one's pleasure with an object, which benefit the object of pleasure, and then an object which gains a favorable response and to be pleased. So it's acceptance and preference sometimes over another. Isn't that interesting? So that's why, I've said repeatedly that everyone's loved the same, but they don't enjoy the same level of favor. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted to go the direction with stunning God, because we're going to see what is the number one attribute to have to gain his favor. And again, it's like he's no respecter of persons. So we know that. Anyone's welcome to come to him. He's not like, no, I don't want you because you're poor, or no, I don't want you because of your skin color, or no, I don't want you because of this, or I'll take you because of this. That's what that's referring to. But again, when it comes to that acts of kindness, fondness, and compassion for another, that actually is a thing. And so it's like, I only had one kid, and I've heard parents say, they didn't have any favorites. I'm sorry. I don't believe that. I saw that my dad was my grandparents' favorite. And they were very careful, but like as, I was an adult and we'd start visiting, it'd come out. And I think it was just because of how he cared for them. Like he was a weird mixture of being the oldest kid of my grandparents, but also the middle kid because she had 2 children from her previous marriage. Mm-hmm. So he had that weird middle kid against the grain, type deal, but also the older kid where he took care of all his siblings, including his older ones, and made sure grandma and grandpa were taken care of. So that just naturally evoked a fondness for him that I don't think that others necessarily had. So I think we can all say that. It's almost like it's not performance-based, but there are things you do that capture his attention and his heart. Does that make sense? Because I don't want to... Mm-hmm. People to get a weird idea on that.
Well, and I think that you have different relationships with each kid, and
Right.
you have different bonding things that you do with each kid, and you have different things in common with each kid. And
So I have favor with my grandmother.
Yeah.
I am the one of 2 out of 15 grandkids that live here. I am the one that goes and does things for her, but because of that, our relationship is closer.
Yep.
Too.
Yep.
So it's not because I do things for her, it's because she knows me better.
Yep.
because you see her more.
Because I see her more.
Yeah. And that...
And she wouldn't tell you that. I mean, she tells me all the time, you're my favorite, but I'm like, oh, you say that to everybody. But
You probably are, though.
But I know that I have special favor with her because we're close.
Yeah. And I think that's actually how relationships are, right? Yeah. Like, if you look at the Lord, he had the masses, okay? Then he had his disciples, which were quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Then he had the 70, so they were in that next level. Then he had the 12, then he had the 3. And, it's like understanding that level, It's like when you have the masses and probably even his followers, which were in the hundreds or thousands, you have that idea, I think it's in John 4, where it says the Lord did not commit himself to man because he knew how man was. So he loved well, but he also understood, things could go south really quick. So where they were saying, the Messiah, the next time they were saying crucify him. But then he also enjoyed that close relationship with, it was Peter, James, and John, I think, right, that went up to the Transfiguration. So they got to have an access and a level to him that the others didn't. And we know it was probably influenced by their teachability, their boldness to, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. They were willing to try things. And so he would monitor, I believe, their hearts, and then he knew which ones could handle more and which ones couldn't. So if we take your example, it's like the Lord knows those who spend time with him. He knows those that choose to turn to him when in pain. He knows those that do the things because their heart is always thinking about him and connected to him, and that evokes his favor. So I wanted to say that because I think as Christians we can get a little bit too generalized, and it actually steals from us that incentive to get as close to him as possible. It's like, well, you should appreciate the giver, not necessarily the gifts. That's crap. He actually says, number one, to seek the gifts. Number two, who would expect to sow something or to do something and not get a return on investment? It's poor business. And then third, the first question out of David's mouth when he saw Goliath is, well, what's in it for the man that takes care of him? Because he knew he could get rid of Goliath. He wanted to know what the rewards were. Yeah. And we're going to see a scripture that will confirm that that's an important part of this. But I wanted to set that context because if we go about it thinking it's a mystery, we may not enter into the reality. So the ways of God are meant to be investigated. That's what the word seek means. You investigate, and then when you investigate, you actually evoke a law because you know what the law is from that point on. Okay? The kingdom is ran by laws. Once you tap into the laws, it's just clockwork. Things work. Wealth, health, relationships, your personal growth, etc.
So relationship encourages the favor of God.
It does. It does. Okay, so then the next thing is in bold. It says one of the most important ways that favor works is in how others perceive you. So when you have the favor of God, people are drawn to you. They want to help you. And this perception is orchestrated by a Father and often tied to his assignment for you. So even enemies sometimes will be willing to lay aside their animosity to work with you when you have the favor of God on you. But also sometimes it can evoke jealousy. Now, if you think about the example I have in here, which is Esther, one of the things I encourage you guys when you're reading the Bible is to get inside the head of the characters, because they were real life people. I mean, we have historical documents. In fact, I was reading one today about Xerxes and Cyrus. And when you look at the story of Esther, you have a king, which kings, queens, they think differently, and it's actually a good idea to understand how kings and queens think, because that's what we are. And if you understand how royalty thinks, you'll then conduct yourself in that way. So like a king or a queen, if they want to do something, there's no questioning. I mean, you know what I mean? Like that's what they do. But a wise king or queen will seek counsel, So if you have something that you're going to do, they make it happen, and they don't stop until it does, and they gather the resources and the people that are necessary. Well, when you've got Xerxes here, his first wife refused an order. So he's a king. You may be married to him, but he's a king. You don't say no. That's why I believe personally that Bathsheba really, although you could say maybe she was an adulteress, I actually think she was a victim, because you don't say no to the king. You know what I mean? She was bathing. The king demanded she come. Did she have any idea that, I don't know. We may not know, but you don't refuse a king. So anyway, she, Vashti, I think was her name, she refused to come to the king's festival. So he, of course, gets rid of her as a wife, and then now they're hunting for the other one. Esther, if you look at Esther, she was very humble. She sought counsel. She did exactly what she was told, and she became the next queen. Because of her demeanor, when he saw her, she had favor. Now, what makes that significant to me is you cannot tell me Xerxes didn't have wounding. Okay, so at the very least, he would have been distrustful, right, of the next queen, because that happened to him. At the very most, he may have loved Vashti, and she broke his heart. We don't know. So the fact that here he had this past situation occur, and then Esther gains favor. That is God orchestrating events, because we know what's going to happen is an attempt to annihilate an entire race of people through Haman, right? So even though there might have been a natural distrust, God worked in his heart this favor for her because she had an assignment. Now, I want to look at this. I bump into Revelation by accident a lot of times, and when I'm studying, I'm in my room going, what? Through our cameras, it'd be a very funny picture. But in Genesis 4, I want to read this because this is the first place where God is stunned by a person. So it says in verse 1, now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering. That word respected is really important. But he did not respect Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. Okay, there's so much. This is actually a prophetic picture of the end of the age. Like that, in the process of time literally means at the end of the age, or at the end of the days. So we're going to see a dynamic probably among the people of God of this type of situation, because you've got in Matthew 24 where the Lord said brother will turn against brother. People's love will grow cold. So there's going to be like a heightened civil war, if that makes sense, in the church. But I don't have time to get into all that. However, where we have Cain, so we have two types of favor happening here. The favor of man, the favor of God. Cain means acquired of the Lord. It also, his name means spear or piercing, okay, which is interesting. Abel, his name means vanity. So can you imagine the dynamic? So Cain, they're twins. So Cain is born, and they're like, oh, I've acquired a man of the Lord, or from the Lord, right? Well, what was the prophecy? You're going to have a son, and he's going to crush the enemy's rule. I propose that Adam and Eve thought Cain was that son. Because we tend to do that. God will show us something and we think it's immediate. And his timetable is like, I don't know, 120 years later. Right?
Yeah.
And so I personally believe they thought Cain was the answer. And so they're like, okay, he's the one. He's going to pierce. He's going to crush the enemy's rule. Oh, surprise, you got another one. And they name him Vanity.
Why?
You know, it's like, why do we have this extra kid? We got the one we need, you know?
Yeah.
And so I could see how Abel's just an afterthought. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so instead of questioning why they had twins, I believe they raised Cain to be the one. So they had his favor, and then you have Abel who had no favor. So he's a tiller of the sheep. He didn't take after the father's business, right? Because Adam tilled the ground. Cain took after his dad. So you can, I'm sure, picture the scenario where you have Cain is the oldest. He's the one that's going to, crush the enemy, and he's the one that took over the dad's business. Abel, where's he? I don't know. Probably out in the field with his sheep. Okay? Same thing with who? David. Forgot David. Well, do you have any other kids? When the prophet's like, do you have any
And
other
they're like,
kids?
oh, we just got one,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you don't want him. Yeah.
He's the baby. Okay, so he gained his parents' favor. Abel, however, gained God's favor. And he did it very specific ways. So now we have the sacrifices, okay? The favor of God upon a person enables them to increase their sacrifice, because with his favor comes reward. And with favor, you have access to resources you would not normally have. All right? So Cain, well, let me also say this. When you have the favor of God, you have access to his heart as well. And Cain worked hard for his provision. So this means he toiled, because tilling the ground, remember, the Lord said, because you did this, when you till the ground, you're going to have toil, where before it just naturally yielded to you. Now you're going to have to work really, really hard. I believe probably Abel's job was a little bit easier Obviously he had to guard the sheep. He had to, lead them, but he got to take naps with them. He got, he got to sit around on the countryside while they ate. I mean, I'm thinking the difference between the farmer and the sheep herder was probably a little bit different. And also we know that it wasn't necessarily the offering itself that bothered God, where Cain offered the grain, because later that was a requirement of the law. Okay, so we know that wasn't a problem, but what I believe is the problem is that Cain was offering a sacrifice out of his own works. He didn't ask God what he wanted. Okay, now I believe I can prove that because Abel's is quite stunning. He offered the firstborn of his sheep and their fat. Where did he get that? Where did he get to add or to offer their firstborn and the sheep or their fat? He would have gotten maybe to sacrifice, but why the first and why the fat? We know later that when God set up the law, he wanted the firstborn and he wanted the fat, but there was no law yet. So he had to have a relationship. And the Lord shared what kind of sacrifice he was looking for. So I believe, like you said, he got a little bit of it from his dad. Because if you go back to Adam and Eve, when they ate from the wrong tree, right? They tried to clothe themselves with fig leaves. And that, again, represents your own works. You're trying to make things better yourself instead of just, accepting what God is offering. God himself killed the first animal and clothed Adam and Eve with it. So that was a definite picture. The blood covers sin. Okay? And I don't know if God had a conversation with them and he shared with them what he was doing there, which I think he probably did. And then I believe they passed that on to Abel. But did they know it was the firstborn? Probably not. Did they know to offer the fat as well? Probably not. So here we have this situation where Abel has a relationship with God, and from his relationship with God, he learns what God wants. Best friends.
It's so specific.
It is.
Well, and
His offering, where Cain's is brought an offering of the fruit of the ground.
Okay. What does that mean?
Well, and since Abel's job was easier, when the sheep were eating, he probably had time to just sit and chat with God.
Exactly. And so did David. He sat there and made worship songs. He thought about God. He killed the lion and the bear, right? So yeah, he did. He had time just to get to know him. Okay, so at the very least, this revelation came as he pondered these things. But I do believe his heart was bent toward God, and I believe Cain's was not. So that tells me the favor you want is from God. Who cares what other people think of you? I mean, seriously, you don't want to go around like being brash. I don't care what you, we're not talking about that. That bullying is a lack of knowing who you are. What we're talking about is you live before an audience of one, and if people misunderstand you, so be it. That's just the way it is. You're going to be obedient to God, and it's better to have his favor instead of man's. So he offers his sacrifice, and then God respects his sacrifice. Okay, so this is one of those accidents. All right, so here's the first definition, but let me tell you what I learned that it means that actually stunned me. Okay, so the word respected means to look with favor and to look on something with approval. Now, how did they know? How did Cain know that his wasn't accepted and Abel's was? See, I wondered this stuff. So there must have been some type of visible demonstration or communication that God received Abel's, but he did not receive Cain's. But there's also, here's the accidental discovery. This is a word, and I could not find my source. So hopefully, take me at my word, but if you find it, please let me know. It was in one of my Greek resources years ago. But this is what happened, the word respected. When Abel offered his sacrifice, God sat back on his throne with his mouth dropped open and looked around and said, "Did you just see that?" He was stunned. Abel stunned God. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. But not like, did you see the dumb thing she just did? Like, I don't want that, right? But I want, wow. wow, like where he's speechless. He doesn't have anything to say, and then he's commending and pointing his attention to you, like, did you just see what she did, right? So that's what happened. He stunned God, absolutely. And then Abel's actions and his favor exposed Cain's true heart condition. So that's where we get into the craziness with favor, because now you got to understand, when you have the favor of God, you will naturally provoke hostility even if you don't mean to. Like, you can literally show up and all of a sudden people are mad, right? Or they don't like you, or they get competitive, or whatever it looks like. Now, if you're going around being a jerk, that's different. You're probably going to get hostility. But if you're just minding your own business and the favor of God is on you, it will expose people's hearts. They will either show themselves as friends or they will show themselves as enemies. And you really want to know who your enemies are. Because we live, okay, first of all, our enemies are supernatural. We know that. But you also need to know the ones that are human. Because we live in a society where enemies hide behind nice greetings and act like they're for you, and then they're undermining you. So we need to be smart in that and know who our enemies are. And so the favor that Abel experienced exposed the murder that was in Cain's heart. And I pretty much guarantee it didn't start with that. I bet Cain, because of his favor with his parents, probably wondered what Abel was doing around too. And all of a sudden, he's not number one. All of a sudden, he's not the favorite. And so the murder, what that means is he was in such a rage that the only way to get rid of his anger was to destroy the object that he felt caused it. So he murdered his brother. Isn't that crazy? So just don't be surprised.
True crime podcast.
It could have been a true crime podcast. Yes. Now, I want to go into the principle of favor here, though. So right before Hebrews 11:4, God explained to Cain the principle of favor. If you do well, won't you be accepted? The word accepted means to be pleasing. Okay? But how did Abel please God? In Hebrews 11:4, by faith, Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it, he being dead still speaks. So that means he offered his sacrifice by faith. You're righteous by faith. Remember Abraham? He believed God, and it was accounted to him as righteousness. So faith has always equaled righteousness. Always. Even before Jesus. So the Lord set the standard. When Jesus came, the guy comes up to him and says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Believe, right? That's it. So it's always been belief. The only thing that we needed was a new nature. So you see faith in the Bible, but they didn't have the nature that allowed them to walk out the kingdom, right? So that's why good people don't go to heaven. Born again people go to heaven, because good people still have a fallen nature unless they're born again, okay? And then this goes back to our David idea in Hebrews 11:6. Without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So that's the principle David was operating on. He knew God and knew that he rewards obedience. And that's why he said, what will come to the one that takes care of him? So Cain, the main idea here is he did not offer his grain by faith. Okay? So it wasn't what he offered, it was a heart motive. He didn't offer it by faith. He offered it out of performance. Performance is where you do things to gain approval, right? Faith is where you get approval in spite of you. I mean, it really is. You can be a stinker, you confess it, you're right back in right standing. So
I'm reading The Theory of Moral Sentiments by Adam Smith.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about the difference between praise and praiseworthiness.
Ooh, I bet that's good.
So like performance is seeking praise.
Yeah.
Being praiseworthy means you do it that you know that you're deserving of praise whether anybody notices
Exactly.
or not.
Yeah. That's
So
good.
It's similar.
It is.
I feel like I struggle with that a lot. Like I'm always looking for, what's the word I'm thinking of? My brain. Like,
Acceptance, approval. Would it be those
yeah,
words?
like approval, a validation,
Uh-huh.
and that's like really. I mean, I've grown a lot. The older I get, I am learning that I don't have to do that, but that is really hard for me.
Just wait till you're 50. You don't give a rip. But no, that is something that he will work out of you, because the first thing is every human experiences rejection. Every human experiences trauma. And that's what actually causes performance. So it's a response to those things. And in order to eliminate or greatly reduce rejection and disapproval, we will perform. But the other thing is, we're naturally, as humans, born with a performance-based mentality because they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So because they ate from that, we naturally have that built in us. So then when we're born again, he has to teach us to eat from the tree of life. And the tree of life wasn't based on performance. And so that's just a natural thing. So that's where processing trauma and doing soul work is so key, understanding how you are. So with you being the D that you are, significance, competency, people knowing that we know what we're doing is a huge thing anyway, right? So we're going to have that natural tendency, but it also has to, I mean, I used to be so performance-based, it was ridiculous. Like I'd beat myself up. Like if I did something wrong, I would tell the Lord, and instead of trusting in his blood, I would beat myself up. And finally, I remember one day, I had actually, it was like a almost like a picture in my mind where I saw my son fall and hurt his knee. And then I saw myself bending down and kissing his boo-boo, right? Because when they're little, they want you to kiss their boo-boos. And then I just felt like the Lord was telling me that it's the same thing. And then that's when I learned there's a difference between rebellion and immaturity. Immaturity, you're going to stumble, you're going to get scuffed up, you're going to learn things. Rebellion's where you just don't care and you're going to do it. That's when he has problems, right? Unbelief is rebellion of faith to him. That's something he doesn't like. So after that, and then I felt like you either trust the blood or you don't. You either trust what Jesus did or you don't. And so one of the best places you can learn that is if you feel like you're performing, or if you feel like you've been rejected, or if you feel like you've made a mistake and the Lord's still mad at you, the best thing to do is just trust him that he's not. That's the best thing you can do. So that's good. I like that. Praiseworthy. It reminds me like integrity, where you do what's right when no one's looking. Praiseworthy is you're going to do what you're going to do, even if you don't get praise from man at all.
Yeah.
That's praiseworthy. I know I used to be offended by the parable where the Lord talks about the servant that does all the work, and then, he expects praise, and the guy's like, well, he was doing his job, and I'm all, well, I know, but I think a job well done, but that was when you have a verse that offends you, you probably need to go deep.
Yeah.
Because something there, it's like, okay, whatever, like it still just made me, but it's true. Don't expect commendation for doing what is required of you. Go above and beyond, So anyway, faith is what caused Abel to stun God. And also, I cannot skip over the fact, I want you to see how God personified sin. He's like, it is lying at the door, attentively watching, and it desired Cain. So he personifies sin as a longing. That bothers me. It's like that's what sin is doing. And the other thing he told him is, but you can rule over it. Now think about how crazy that statement is. There's no Jesus yet. He didn't die on the cross. Of course, he's God. He's on the throne, but he didn't come as a man yet. And God is telling him, you can rule over this. So if Cain could rule over what was going on, how much more can we with a new nature, right? So sin does not have dominion over us. Romans 6 is the best chapter to read if you want to understand our relationship with sin now. But the idea of it lying there is similar to a lion crouching, waiting to pounce. That's the idea. So we have the power over sin, and then we have grace to say no to sin. Okay, so the next one I love this one, is in Matthew 15. This lady, I admire her, and I cannot wait to meet her, because I probably would have been like, wow, that Jesus sure was a jerk. I just wanted a miracle. Okay, so in verse 21 of Matthew 15, it says, Then Jesus went out from there, and he departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came from that region and cried out to him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, son of David, my daughter is severely demon-possessed. But he didn't answer her. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, Would you send her away? Because she cries out after us. And he answered and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And I'm thinking he might have been responding to them, but I'm not sure. So then she came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he said, It's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. That word little is important. And she said, Yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table. And so Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, great is your faith, let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed that very hour. Okay, so Lebanon, she was Lebanese. The Lebanon nation was Christian for many, many years. I remember that back in the 80s, and then the wars broke out. I used to sit under the mentorship of a man that was from Lebanon. So this woman is why Lebanon was Christian. Okay, so she was the first Christian that was Lebanese. Also, where it says cry out, she was screaming at the top of her lungs, okay? So just picture, pretend you're Jesus, you have your entourage. You're traveling through the region and you got some maniac following you, screaming at you, right? Like, I would have been like, can we like maybe just give her a miracle or send her away? Like, what can we do here for this situation? And the Lord, he just keeps on walking. And so, I mean, it was like a crazy situation. But here's the thing. She called him son of David. That was a messianic term. So this non-Jew knew he was the Messiah, which I find that kept happening over and over. The people who were not Jewish knew he was the Messiah. The people who were Jewish did not recognize him. That is often, unfortunately, the same situation today. So then, that's stunning. The second stunning fact is she kept going, even though he ignored her. And I doubt it was just a few steps, right? I mean, there's no telling, like, was it days? Was she following them around for days while he's traveling through this region and would not go away? Could be. So finally, he's like, okay, look, I didn't come here except to Israel. And then she bowed down. That's the same word from last week's study. She worshiped him as God. And then she called him Lord. It's the Greek equivalent of Yahweh. So she knew he was God. So he's like, I wasn't sent to you guys. That's going to come later. I shouldn't give the children's bread to the little dogs. Okay, so the word dog, like, how Palestinians call Jews pigs? The Jews would call non-Jews dogs. And dogs were considered unclean animals. But he called her a little dog. So that was a pet. So the term dogs for the Jew to the non-Jews were to those nations that were like wolves in nature. They were ravenous. They wanted to take their land. So they didn't just call any Gentile a dog. It was anyone that was sent to oppress or torment them. But he calls her a little dog, which is a pet. And so I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, Jesus is stunned. And he commented on her, quote, upper range of faith. That's a literal description of her faith in one of the resources I found. And he said, let it be as you desire. And we're going to see this repeated with the Roman soldier. I want to read this one from the Passion in Matthew 8, 5 through 13. When Jesus entered the village of Capernaum, a captain in the Roman army approached him asking for a miracle. Lord, he said, I have a son who is lying in my home, paralyzed and suffering terribly. Jesus said, I'll go with you and heal him. But the Roman officer interjected, Lord, who am I to have you come into my house? I understand your authority, for I too am a man who walks under authority and have authority over soldiers who serve under me. I can tell one to go and he'll go, and another to come and he'll come. I order my servants and they'll do whatever I ask. So I know that all that you need to do is stand here and command healing over my son, and he will be instantly healed. Jesus was astonished. There it is again. Stunned. When he heard this and said to those who were following him, he has greater faith than anyone I've encountered in Israel. Whoops. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. Multitudes of non-Jewish people will stream from the east and the west to enter into the banqueting feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the heavenly kingdom. But many Israelites born to be heirs of the kingdom will be turned away and banished into the darkness where there will be bitter weeping and unbearable anguish. Then Jesus turned to the Roman officer and said, "Go home. All that you have believed for will be done for you." And his son was healed at that very moment. Now, why didn't he help the Phoenician woman right off the bat? Or the Canaanite? Isn't that interesting? See, I'm like, okay, you were willing to go into a Roman soldier's house, which the Roman soldier understood for the Jew it would make them unclean. So he's like, no. I know how this works. All I need from you is a word. It's done. Okay? So obviously understanding authority helps us with faith. But what I find fascinating is he was willing to go with the Roman soldier and not go with her, or at least give her the decree until she stunned him with her faith. I think it was actually to prevent a problem. The Romans were occupiers. You didn't say no to a Roman. Okay? So it's probably expedient for him to go with the Roman soldier to not bring undue attention. So that's the only thing I can think of, unless you guys have thoughts. I mean, I know it's a little sidebar, but I was like, well, that's not fair. Why would you, obviously there's something going on. Okay. The Roman called him Lord as well, which is Yahweh. So he also recognized him as God. The word astonish means to wonder, marvel, be struck with admiration or astonishment. Jesus was amazed and stunned at the Roman man's faith. And he said it was greater than any Israelite he had encountered, and used it as an example of an indictment, and also that we're going to be able to join the kingdom. Now, the final thing that I want you guys to notice is that he always says according to your faith, or what you desire. That is key, because I think sometimes we think God picks what prayers he's going to answer and what ones he isn't, and that's not how that works. Now, if you ask a prayer that's wrong, he won't answer it, or he'll tell you no. But when it's in line with his word, he's not willy-nilly picking, okay, I'm going to go ahead and answer Kayla's prayer, but I'm not going to answer Linez. That doesn't make any sense. It's according to our faith. So you want to have faith before you need it. So I always recommend, wherever you're weakest, if it's your health, if it's relationships, if it's money, if it's your own personal development, whatever that looks like, whatever is the weakest area, that's where you want to read the most scripture about. Okay? So with anger, when I used to have it really bad, I spent 30 days reading every scripture I could find about anger. So whatever is your weak area, you need to get the faith and you need to get that in place, because you don't want to figure out that God wants you well when you're fighting a sickness, because then your mind is occupied with the sickness, if that makes sense. But faith attracts favor. I hope you guys saw that. So that is the key. Faith attracts favor. So that's a very first step. You want to get his attention, have faith. So if we go back to the gifts, if you look at those of you that operate in the gift of faith, it may be a little bit easier for you at times, and other times you may struggle in other areas, because I think you had a gift of faith. But also know that you exercising your gift of faith also attracts his favor. So I'm curious, if you look back, for those of you that had that gift, but for sure I know you did, if you look back at the story of the firehouse and the faith that you had, I bet you could pinpoint favor.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Cool.
Does anything stand out?
Well, I would say it was when everything comes together smoothly and easily.
Has to be the favor of
I would say
God.
that's favor.
Yeah, especially in real estate transactions.
Mm-hmm. Well, not just that, but when I took that building apart, there were no huge
Issues.
surprises. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to see before and afters of those.
Oh, it's so cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to see it.
So cool. Yeah, when I look at the house, so the people that owned the house was actually a company that owned the house. The fact that we got it for what, like I had a number, like I had a number in my head that I was not going to budge on, and I knew that was from Holy Spirit. And when we got, like I went 5 under, and then they met us at that number, I knew that was God.
Yeah.
Because there's no way, that the business would have done that. So it is. It's like when I knew that was our house. And then to even have the extra favor to be able to move in on our birthday. If you've worked with real estate or realtors,
Yeah.
you never get in early. Forget it. And the fact we were able to move it up and the business agreed, that was favor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it's faith attracts favor. So that's your starting point, and just this final note, wherever, and I've said it before, but it's so important to our purposes, wherever you struggle to believe, there's a lie, okay? So you've got to get to the root of the lie. So like if we take the performance, right? So performance is an opposite of belief, okay? Like when I used to perform all the time, I didn't believe what God said. But that required the word, right? We're in a process. It's silly to think that we're going to be born again and come out mature with teeth, driving cars and everything else. You know what I mean? It's like you grow into those things. So there's that process. But when you persist in performance and refuse to change, now we're getting into something that's a little bit deeper. But Adam and Eve fell because they believed a lie. Performance is typically centered in maybe parents that required you to do certain things in order to feel accepted. It could be that. It could be the natural thing of if you do right, it'll go well with you, which is a principle that is important. But because of our natural tendency to perform, it can carry over. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like in school, do your work, you get good grades. That's normal. Do a good job at your work, you get promotions, right? So there is a performance level. Where it becomes a problem is where you think that you're accepted if you perform. That's where the problem is. So the lie, you need to trace it down. For everybody, it'll be different. For me, it was abusive stepmoms. For you, it may be something totally different. So always trace it down. Wherever you're weak or wherever there's unbelief, there's a lie somewhere. Okay? And once you trace it down, once you have the enlightenment, then it helps you because then you're like, I know what that is, and you can get out of it a lot quicker.
Or you can say, this is not that, once you know that.
Yep. Yeah, because your brain will automatically go, oh. All right, I think that's it. Do y'all have anything else to add? Or can you see, do you want to share any, a favor story where you knew, that was a favor of God?
This is really interesting. So, I haven't talked a lot about my past, but I had a very colorful past, came from, addict parents, in and out of prison and stuff, and I kind of followed in that footsteps, but this always sticks out in my mind. It's like such an amazing thing. So my first husband, who we have a great relationship now, but we're divorced, obviously. I'm a new husband. But
that'd be good, because I think it's against the law to have more than one.
But I was pregnant with our daughter, and he